Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Vamily Show, Season 2, Episode 23 with Rob and Perry Braun. She is author of multiple books, and they have to do with different subjects. And I kind of went back on your YouTube channel as well and saw some of your ideas. But your latest is Thrive, I believe, is your latest book. And
Yep.
in there, I'm kind of excited to talk to you because I've talked to some of my friends and people I know about the water experiments and about how music can affect how the ice crystals form and stuff like that. And then listening to you talk and researching there's more to it than that. So I definitely want to hear more about that. It was more than just music, but a lot of people out there that listen to this are homesteaders or grow stuff, and so if you play music near your plants, it can have an effect. Because I put that together, I was like, if it affects water like that, and they said music has an effect on plants, I'm
Yeah.
just putting those two ideas together and saying, well, that logically anyway makes sense to me of why it would have that effect. And is that something that goes into depth in your book?
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, I quote some, I have a whole chapter on intention and collective consciousness. And I talk a lot about a book called The Intention Experiment by Lynn McTaggart. And there's a couple of really fascinating experiments in that your plant people would, or your farmers or homesteaders would love. One was fascinating to me in that they were talking about how plants have feelings, and they're talking about what we call the field, which means everything's connected. We're all connected. So this one was kind of mind blowing to me. They took plants and they basically sat them in like a surrounding pitch or thing of water, and they put the equivalent of a EEG machine in the water. Okay, so we know water conducts electricity and conducts everything. And they were trying to measure if they could figure out if plants have feelings, right?
Right.
And so what happened in this accidental experiment was in the room right next to where the plants were, somebody had taken a pot of coffee, like hot coffee, and poured it down the drain. And as they were pouring it down the drain, the EEG machine on these plants kind of went nuts.
Wow.
And they were trying to figure that out. And so what they figured out is that the hot water was actually killing bacteria or life in the sink. And the plants were registering in the next room death, the death of these organisms. And so they piggybacked that to another experiment where they took krill, which are like baby shrimp, or they're mollusks in the ocean. It's what whales eat. And they were doing this intentionally. Now they took a pot of boiling water and they put the krill in the boiling water. And again, the EEG machines kind of went nuts on the plants when they were doing that. And so what they determined was that plants are super sensitive energetically. So what I teach in quantum physics is just really understanding that we're made up of atoms, we're made up of energy, and we're giving off frequencies all the time, and our frequencies are either positive or negative, and we're receiving frequencies all the time. So our thoughts are frequencies, and so they can affect us positively or negatively. And so love, joy, peace, are good frequencies. Hate, fear, shame, those are low frequencies. And so in this plant experiment, they were actually showing how sensitive the plants were to life and maintaining life. And, so it's just, that, wow, the fact that they could figure out a way to measure that was fascinating, but just really realizing everything we do has an energetic component to it. And, so yes. And I also, matter of fact, this video is going up on my YouTube channel today. A friend of mine with the Masaru Emoto, there's what they call the rice experiment. And this is recreatable. And so I
remember hearing about this one too, but go ahead and talk about it because
so
it's really fascinating.
I actually did this experiment. So this is not one step removed. Like I've seen this with my own eyes. And she took 2 peanut butter jars and she put freshly cooked white rice in them. And she put love and beauty on one, and she put hate and ugly on the other. She wrote it with words on the glasses. She put them in 2 different parts of the house. And she just, each day she would stand in front of the beauty love and just read the words. But as she was reading it, she would think, what those words mean. And then she would do the same with the hate and ugly. And so 3 weeks later, she took pictures of each of these jars of rice. And the one with the love and beauty was still white. And the one with the hate and ugly had turned brown. And you can kind of see on the back of the picture where it's even black, blackened.
Yeah.
And so, these truly are firsthand experiments that I can vouch for that they work.
Right. And like Van Language Una says, that's crazy. And it is. There's I even tried that one myself too and found the same thing. I even kept them like in the same environment so that was not even a variable, and just the only different is would pick up one and think those thoughts on the one, and then pick up the other one and think the other thoughts. But everything else I kept the same. Yeah. Just because I remember from science class when I was younger, I wanted to keep every single variable I could to a minimum just to make sure that it was that was having the effect most of all. Yeah. And another thing that's fascinating, when I really got into looking at like the Big Bang and everything, they talk when you look in the Bible and it says, "Let there be light," and it was like an instant. Well, that describes the Big Bang to me better than anybody else saying what happened before it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just as good as any other explanation. And that's kind of what your book goes into too, how it's related into biblical stuff.
Absolutely. And I think, one of my, so I'm a practicing holistic practitioner. And so I have a background in, I have a master's in psychology. I was a licensed counselor. I actually just finished my doctorate in integrated medicine, which is from an energy or a quantum university. And so really my passion is, one of the things is educating people to understand it's not just what they say, but it's what they think, And what's interesting when you really understand quantum energy is we know if somebody's lying to us because their intentions are sent out as energetic signals, even if their words contradict what they say. So intuitively, or like we can say, I don't trust that person, or, that I feel like that wasn't true. We genuinely are these lie detector tests. We're registering energetically. We're communicating energetically 24/7. And so, just from a simple educational standpoint, really understanding that what I think, what I feel, what I intend, and that's what the Dr. Masaru, it wasn't just music, but it was literally words written on a piece of paper, the intention of the word, not just the saying the word out loud, but what the word meant. Right. Changed the outcome of what the water molecules looked like. So we have so much power in our thoughts and our words to create or to tear down. And, from a parental standpoint, we just don't understand the authority in our voice and the power in our voice with how we form our children's self-esteem and all that just from what we say. But even more than what we say is what we don't say, but we think and we intend. Mm-hmm. And so, it's just really amazing how much power we wield. And I always say we're like icebergs. So 95% of that power is subconscious and we don't even realize it.
Right. And when we're, the thing that really blew my mind and kind of like you, I started looking at things a little differently in the Bible is when that water experiment, look at how many times the water is in the Bible, the living well and Noah's flood and all the different things that water has such an effect on. You're mostly made up of water. They figure that life only exists with water. Well, if water has to exist for there to be life, then maybe God is in water most of all, since it connects everything. And ironically, it's something that you drink every day, maybe, one part of God itself.
Absolutely. That's really interesting. I do think, I also work with frequency machines and devices. And one of the types of energy or frequency devices can actually imprint water with certain frequencies that are specific to you. So if you came to see me and I had one of those machines, I would run a scan on you energetically, and I would say, okay, you need some dopamine and you need this and you need that. And I could take that energy and I can apply it to water, because water conducts sound and frequency better than any medium. It's one of the best. And so I could literally imprint that water and then give it to you as what we would call custom homeopathic. And then like you drinking that water would be the same thing as me plugging you into a frequency device or wearing a microcurrent device that was sending those frequencies into your body. So that's actually a very common practice in alternative medicine.
Well, that's incredible to think that you can do stuff like that. And it's something that, I'm so fascinated to share that with people, because when I first found that out, I'm like, no, and I didn't believe it until I did the experiment myself. And it's a very simple experiment, like we were saying. You can get some rice, cooked rice, put it in 2 Tupperware containers, write love on one and hate on the other, and make sure you think about that when you're, like I was telling you, and you'll see one will mold and stuff faster than the other. And that'll make you really rethink almost how you think about the universe in general. At least it did for me, because it's like just my thoughts can create that. And I kind of had a thought when I was listening to you, because you were talking about how everything's vibration, sound, and light and everything. The human body is really then built in all kinds of ways as a vibration detection machine.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So so one of the things I tell people is, and maybe you experience this too, because just hearing the story of your life up until this point has been interesting, and you can share that if you'd like to. I'd really like to hear it again. But I, until recently, I couldn't even accept religious ideas and stuff like that, because of everything that happened in my life. So until my mindset was changed, whatever, like we were talking about, the vibrations, frequencies, whatever it is of any messages, couldn't even get through, because I was so stuck in a negative mindset. So I don't know. I'm pretty sure you might have had the same experience before you got to where you're at.
Yeah, so kind of my story, and this book I wrote, and here's a copy of it, Thrive. So it's really kind of a life work culmination. And, I will mention that not this week, but next week, the 21st through the 27th of September, you can get Thrive on Kindle for 99 cents that week. So, I'm really passionate about educating people. We're stuck in this whole radical season, first of all, of people suddenly realizing that there might be things that happen on this planet that doctors don't know the answer to and can't fix. And so, maybe I better start taking care of my health, because I can't do anything I want now and run to a doctor and get a magic pill, which is what I teach anyway. But all of a sudden people are awakening to this idea of, hey, we've been kind of brainwashed to believe that you can do whatever you want and a doctor can fix it if I get sick. And it's just not true. It's not aligned with the way your body's designed to think that way. So we've got this whole move of people scared. So fear actually lowers your immune system. So we have people stuck in fear. We already have this massive epidemic of anxiety and depression and other things going on prior to this COVID thing. And so that's just exacerbated. And now we have, 2 months before the election, we always have this massive amount of hate spewing and arguing and radicalization of whatever opinion you may have. And then, you're in a part of the country where there's all these rioting and protests and stuff going on, and that's scary, and so just there's a lot of fear going on right now, and fear on a scale of, hey, love, joy, peace, fear, shame, hate, those kind of things. This is like one of the lowest vibrational emotions we can experience, and it makes us vulnerable to lots of bad things. And so, and the Bible even talks about that. So I think for such a time as this, I wrote this book that just happened to actually finished it a little over a year ago, and it just step by step getting edited for the release now, is really just a very timely paradigm for people to understand how to take responsibility for your own mental, emotional, spiritual, physical health. And here are some really practical tips on how to do that. So even if I have like 50 pages of things you can do to change your frequency or your vibration, and you could implement 5 or 10 of those, it could make a radical shift, in your life. And I think what with my story, I had an eating disorder, young, and I went to counseling. That's kind of where I went, oh, God's called me to be a counselor. And then I had chronic fatigue in my mid-20s, and I knew that there was no cure for it. I happened to make a naturopathic friend. Just happened to go to a chiropractor who used muscle testing. And he said, I've never heard muscle testing before, didn't know what it was.
Sure.
He didn't explain it very well, but basically with his little bottles and stuff, again, it's vibrational. He said, you have mercury toxicity. And I had a ton of heavy metal filling. I had a ton of fillings. I had bad teeth. And this is way back before the ADA even acknowledged metal fillings could possibly be bad for you. Right now, nobody would put a metal filling in your mouth. And so this was like 1989. So I went and got all my fillings replaced with composites, and my chronic fatigue went away. And so I really, kind of went on this journey of alternative medicine, completely using tools that I learned, got free from the eating disorder, got married. My ex-husband had a sexual addiction, which is one of the books I've written is for spouses of sex addicts. And so again, I'm like, I don't believe anything's incurable. I'm tenacious. Let's try to find things that work. My marriage lasted 15 years. We did tons and tons of therapy and prayer ministry and all kinds of cutting edge techniques, and he just didn't get free from it. And so we ended up divorced, but I still kept believing, there's answers. And so around 2010, I moved to Dallas, and I went through a deep depression. It was some complex PTSD from my marriage, moved my kids across the country, didn't have any friends, all new stuff. I went back to graduate school at that point. And I just remember standing in front of the mirror one day going, I have done way too much therapy, inner healing, for me to believe these things that are these messages, these programs that are coming up in my head. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, I know that these techniques work, but what am I missing? And so it just seemed like what opened up everywhere I went was the law of attraction, quantum physics, this idea of the subconscious and reprogramming the subconscious, and how our beliefs get formed in our subconscious and how powerful our subconscious is. And so little by little, it just kind of led me on that journey. I wrote my first book in 2013 with these principles. Since then, I've learned a ton more, and I've been seeing clients professionally full-time for 7 years. So I was able to use client stories and more of the understanding I gained in those 7 years to rewrite my book last year and add quite a bit of content. And that's what, this is. I think my first book, my intention was more about educating Christians that the law of attraction was not just new age and metaphysical, that it was also in scripture. And I'm still passionate about that education process because I think it's powerful. This book, I think I even more so am really, really passionate about people understanding that they can truly thrive in their life, no matter what their life has been or circumstances have been. And I don't know a lot of people who I truly feel like they feel like their life is thriving.
Right.
And so that's really kind of where I want to, help bring people is, hey, you have the power to do this. You're not a victim of the universe or your circumstances.
Yeah. And I want to kind of say on that, it seems like with you writing this book, because I turned the corner recently on how I felt about all the stuff that happened in my life, for being angry about it. And we can talk about people bottling anger up in like iceberg. And I think I wrote down something about like releasing blocks and the trapped emotions and all that stuff, and how that applies in anger and all that stuff. But
Sure.
to almost being thankful what happened, so that me getting more and more successful at whatever I do can show people that whatever has happened to you, you can push through it. And you can actually, like your book says, thrive in what you're doing in life.
Yeah, and it's really important. I think your story is the most powerful thing you have. And to be that example of people who are stuck and you go, hey, I was able to transform through this really hard, scenario and situation, and I'm on the other side of this, and you can get there too. You have, sorry to use a too spiritual word, but I call it the anointing. You have an anointing to bring people through what you've been through. And, and that's a biblical principle, but it's true. It's true in life. Whatever we walk through, then we seem to have authority to help other people walk through that same thing and encourage them in that. So.
Right. And you can use spiritual word. I'm a volunteer for my church, so it's perfectly
Okay.
fine. So you're very fun to do that. But I kind of want to know, and kind of give me a rundown about that, the trapped emotions, because I definitely experienced that.
Sure.
And sometimes you don't even realize you're trapping them either.
Yeah. And so, my kind of background is very ministry, spiritual oriented. And I'd gone through a lot of what we call inner healing, some deliverance, therapy, done a ton of forgiveness work and all that. But in 2012, long story short, I got introduced to a process called the emotion code, which has been around for quite a while. And he was the first source I saw where we learned we could use muscle testing to communicate directly with the subconscious to find trapped emotions, traumas, other things, right? And so I went, oh, okay. So I felt very much called to get certified in this emotion code process. And so I just began to find these trapped emotions in myself. And one of the things I discovered is that, when you go to therapy, you typically talk about just the things that were traumatic to you. But we have so many trapped emotions from just everyday life, and one example was I sat down and I went, okay, I'm going to release every emotion of rejection I've ever felt, right? So I'm muscle testing. And I was surprised at things like having a crush as a teenager on a boy who doesn't like you, or a girl, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, everybody has that. And so I never really thought about that would be something I would go talk to my therapist about. Oh, Bobby didn't like me back, right? But it was still a trapped emotion, and it created a belief. And the belief attached to that trapped emotion was that the guy I like will never like me back. Mm. That is a hugely common belief I have with so many clients. I'll never find love because when I like someone, they don't like me back. And when someone likes me, I don't like them back. And it never just aligns. I see this over and over again. So what I began to realize was that and I understand that we think 60,000 thoughts a day, and then that iceberg is about 95% of them are subconscious.
Wow.
So many things where Americans are so disconnected from their emotions in general is we intellectualize these things. And so even though I could tell you it was crushing for so-and-so not to like me back, my mind would have been like, well, like he was out of my league anyway. I don't know why I even thought I could have liked him, but I never acknowledged that that hurt.
Right.
So we just live in this world where we don't get to acknowledge our emotions. So we have no other choice but to stuff them. And we all literally have thousands of these trapped emotions. But what's more significant, and so I always teach that emotions are just balls of energy. I have a video of this on my YouTube channel, which is kind of fun, but I use these little cat balls because balls of energy. And so if we think about an emotion as a ball of energy and a thought as a ball of energy, and if I have these thoughts and states of heightened emotion, in quantum physics says these two things connect together and now they form a belief. The belief is the key thing, okay? Sure. I can feel better from rejection, but if that rejection made me feel I'm not lovable, I'm worthless, I'm not enough, that belief I carry with me. And essentially what quantum physics says is whatever we believe is a magnet. And so I'm going to continue to attract reinforcement. We also can say it's a lens. I'm looking for that to happen to me again because I'm expecting it.
Right.
So a lot of the work I do is helping people identify these and then disconnect them. Because, if I believe I'm God's daughter, then I believe I deserve somebody who I would meet my criteria as a great human being. And,
Right.
so much of my clientele that keep me in business are relationships,
Right.
toxic on one side or the other, and they're not gender specific. There's just as many on either side of the gender where they're toxic. And so understanding, why do I keep attracting the same person over and over again? What is it in me that I haven't identified, these trapped emotions and beliefs that keep me attracted? And they'll tell you, I keep dating the same guy repeatedly, and it's not someone I like or want to date. I don't know why I keep doing this, or vice versa.
Right.
Every girlfriend I've ever had cheats on me.
Right.
So,
and it's codependency that leads to all that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I keep trying to replay this, and I go, why do I keep going for the bad boy? I know it's not going to work out. And so quantum physics gives some actual science behind why that happens. And so that's a big part of this process is finding those things and disconnecting them and going, well, what if I could have whatever I want? What do I want? What if I do get what I want? What if the universe is for me? I had a super close relationship with the Lord, and I still didn't believe the universe was for me. Things would go wrong, things would go bad. I wasn't getting what I wanted in life. And so they're not necessarily the same thing. No matter how much you believe God loves you, you can still believe life isn't going to work out for you very well.
Right.
And, a lot of people are raised in homes where literally their parents say life sucks and then you die. And so they just kind of grow up believing they don't ever really get to be happy. They don't get to thrive. They don't get to have joy. And it's just not true.
Yeah. Yeah. So many people get stuck in that. They figure, why even try to have joy? So, why even do that at all? And Roach, Coach, if you want the national hotline, it's right there. 1-800-273-8255. That hotline. What when you look back and go back in time, because I wasn't a very good student in school. I guess you said you were pretty good student in school. If you went back in time to talk to that young lady in high school, what would you believe yourself of what you're doing now and the things that you've learned?
Well, it's funny. When I went into that treatment center at 21, I went, oh my gosh, I was wired to be a psychologist. This is the way I think, but until that time, I had no ambition in that arena. I wasn't sure. I started out in college with being a Spanish and economics major. I was going to do international business. And, but I knew, I had to come out of denial about having the eating disorder, but I was what we would call an empath. So I actually had a pretty good childhood, but I would say, so an empath does not only stuff their own emotions, but they absorb everybody else's emotions in the room. And so I remember even going through all that therapy for years. I'm like, why am I such a basket case? I actually had a pretty good childhood, but it was those sensitive, I call them spongy. They absorb everything, super empathetic. I can feel your feelings better than you can. And then I grew up in what we call a no talk, no feel home. Had great parents. They were both raised in the Depression. They had no clue how to talk to a child about their emotions. I had two brothers who didn't need to be talked to about their emotions. And then I grew up in Massachusetts, which is not a very warm, fuzzy feeling environment. So I just, everywhere around me, I just kind of thought, oh, well, you're not supposed to talk about your feelings. You're supposed to keep it all aside and act like you have it together. But even as an early child, I can remember I would watch movies just to have a safe place to cry. Movies would be my catharsis. And, I have no problem crying in front of people. I think it's very freeing for other people. And even my kids we'll be watching a trailer for a movie and my kids will look over and I'm crying at the trailer, and I have no problem doing that because I think we are so unexpressive emotionally in this country. And I believe it is one of the absolute roots of why we're the most addicted, depressed, obese, anxious nation in the world, medicated, is because we're not raised in environments where it's okay to feel. And then
Right.
even if we think we can, if we feel, we're told you're too sensitive or nobody knows how to help us process those feelings. So that's my end goal. I don't want you to come see me the rest of your life. I want you to get freed up. I like to use the analogy of we're all like volcanoes. And we have this crusty lid on the top, and energy work helps get that crusty lid off the top, and then that lets that lava flow out. And that's probably a lot of, anger is kind of that lava flowing out, but you don't know why. Several of my clients who've never felt their whole life and been medicated, and after I've worked with them for a couple months, they'll call me up and they'll go, I'm so angry. I just want to bite everybody's head off right now. And I'll go, yay. The feeling finally coming out,
Right. And I'm sure you run into that quite a bit of people doing that. And I tell people when I dealt with therapy and all that stuff, I got tools in my toolbox to be able to help me and realize what's going on. It doesn't prevent the feelings and stuff from happening, but you're able to recognize and then able to do better with the things you have. And Six Roach, yes, she is a professional. She's got are you still a doctoral candidate or
I have now finished my PhD. I have to submit a little paperwork, so within a very short period of time I can say doctor. I have a master's in psychology. I have a lot of certifications in counseling. I chose not to finish, and I did all the prereqs, but I did not get my licensed professional counselor certification simply because there's certain things that I felt I ethically couldn't do that I can do as an energy practitioner. And at that point, I had already developed my energy practice and I didn't really need the LPC, and I didn't really want the state breathing down my throat about neck about everything. I saw some trauma from some colleagues.
Right.
And so I thought, I don't need that. So, so I don't use that, but yes.
So how did your guest spot or guest expert spot on One Life Radio on iHeartRadio work out?
Great. So basically what happened was in 2015, the host of the show, she also owned a float spa. And one of my friends was talking to her at the float spa and gave her my books, and she reached out to me. So I started coming on the show and basically talked about psychological topics, but from a more quantum and energy perspective. So it was a little bit different than some of the other psychologists on there. So I was on the show regularly every week for a little over 3 years. And then I moved from Dallas to Austin. And so now I'm on the show about once a month. I'll be on there next Monday. And so it's been a great show. I love doing the show. It goes nationwide to a bunch of people. And, it just, even if I don't get the direct feedback, I just love knowing that I'm helping educate people on how to stay well and healthy and, taking care of ourselves. Right now there's such a big thing on understanding our constitutional freedoms. Well, one of those freedoms is about self-care and not depending on someone else to take care of us. And so we haven't done a very good job on educating people how to do that mentally, emotionally, or nutritionally or health-wise, and so really my passion is going, look, this isn't like New Year's resolutions that fail. These are little things you can change in your life little by little. And just like your story, most of the time people come to a health crisis before they ask for help. And then once they start getting that, they're like, oh, why didn't I do this sooner? Boy, this feels so different than how I lived before. And I want to now share that with other people who are stuck and hopeless.
Yeah.
I want to say one thing about the emotions too. I was thinking I can distinctly remember a point in time in my marriage when I found out my ex-husband had acted out, and I remember feeling, for lack of a better word, hopeless despair. I'm stuck in this marriage. I'm gonna feel this way the rest of my life. And prior to that, through the eating disorder, I learned how to start feeling my feelings, but life had been pretty good. And so this was one of those first times where I felt trapped, hopeless, helpless, stuck in a corner, with no out, and that I was going to have to feel this way the rest of my life. And I remember just embracing the emotion, like just crying. I called a friend. I would go before God and just kind of rant. And I remember waking up the next day feeling better. And I didn't understand energy medicine at the time, but I just remember thinking, oh, so if we'll actually just feel the feeling, no matter how bad it is, we'll feel better. Oh my gosh. And that's really what emotional maturity is. It's feeling bad and letting yourself feeling bad. And the time frame gets shorter and shorter. So if I was in this relationship and my boyfriend cheated on me and I felt devastated and betrayed and I didn't have very much emotional maturity, it might take me 5 years to get over it because I don't ever want to feel that way again. But once I developed some emotional maturity, which is simply the ability to feel a feeling and feel better because it's how we're wired, then I would get over it in a few days. And that's really what we're designed to do, is feel something, release it, feel something, release it. And not a lot of people know how to do that because we've not been modeled or taught how to practice that.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of our ability to have conscious thought and memories that kind of ruins that for us. Is just like every other animal, you're designed, like you're saying, to quick and release and a lot of stuff. But then having the ability to think and have memories, then it overrides your body and makes it keep producing the stress hormones, all that stuff that come out.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely something you have to learn. It's kind of they don't really teach you in school the stuff that you could actually use your whole life.
Right.
It's kind of disappointing in that way. I kind of wanted to know, in doing that radio show, you probably talked to a lot of different people on it. I'm guessing they have call-in people sometimes and maybe ask you questions. Have you kind of noticed that a lot of people share, if nothing else, there's such a commonality of feelings between people and events that it kind of helps you out in your own life?
Well, I agree. It was not a call-in show. It's more of an interview show on a topic. So I would talk about, one of my expertise is in sexual addiction. So that's kind of where I started on the show. And then just any topic every week, I would pick a different topic. But in my private practice, I do see, and in just my observation kind of sociologically, is that most people struggle with exactly the same things. And there's not like, some of it alienates or isolates because of shame. So, if I have a client who is addicted to pornography, but it's a deviant form of pornography versus regular pornography, they're not going to want anybody to know that. And so shame is a really common binder that keeps people trapped in whatever bondage it is, because it's in that darkness and that secrecy that it's kind of like you talked about the light earlier. As soon as God shines his light on something, we can get freedom from it. Darkness is not God's realm. So that usually is a common factor, is shame. One of the things epidemically is depression, anxiety, even among young people. And I do a lot of teaching on electromagnetic radiation and the effects of cell phones on your brain and on your body. And I talk about it from a frequency or energy standpoint. I'm actually going to be talking at a summit in Austin, Constitutional Summit in October on that topic with 5G and everything coming out. So, there's super common experiences, and my simple, it's not simple, it's complex, but it's consistent, is that when we don't process emotions as children, we don't have a safe place to do that. You talked about stress hormones and all that. Safety is a very important factor. And that lack of safety, keeps us in kind of a state of fight or flight or freeze.
Mm-hmm.
And just understanding emotionally, we disconnect from ourselves, from our emotions when we don't feel safe. And we have to self-protect. And that's where a lot of people are. And even people will go, why do I have to go back and deal with my past? And I'm like, because your past determines your present. And so, this is who you are. You're a sum total plus of all of this past stuff and your trapped emotions and your beliefs and all that. So it is important we go back and deal with those things. And so the common thread for everybody is that most people have not dealt with their pain, trauma, trapped emotions, negative beliefs. Most people have resigned themselves that life sucks at some level, and this is as good as it gets. And they don't know what they don't know. They don't know it can be better. So whether they're sick in the body because they've held all those trapped emotions in and they've gotten a disease or a sickness, whether they've got anxiety or depression because that's how it manifested, or an addiction, most of the time the roots are all the same.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And your thoughts when you're talking about fear there, I tell people all the time, fear of rejection can keep you from doing lots of things. And your thoughts have, and we talked about it with the water, the water experiment, there's a physical thing too. And I also told people, if you're going to pick something up, like this or whatever, and you think it's full and you go to pick it up and it's empty, you usually your hand, your arm, because your mind had already anticipated something there and had already made adjustments before you actually picked it up.
Yeah. And then take that example in relationships. We already assume we know how you're going to respond to what I'm going to say based on past experience. And we're already preparing our reaction for what we think you're going to say to what we're about to say. And that's like 90% of our interaction is in the future based on the past. We already think we know how this is going to go. And depending on our past experience, let's say I'm going in for a job interview and I have not gotten hired for the past 10 job interviews. I'm taking that energy into this next job interview. Mm-hmm. If every past job interview I've done, I've been the top candidate, gotten the job, I'm taking that into my job interview. And so what I say about like shifting and quantum change is, imagine being in a car and you're driving on a highway you've never been on before, and you get to paint the landscape you're going to get to see on that journey, but you have to break off the rearview mirror in order to paint the landscape. You've never been on this journey. You've never seen this part of the country. You have no idea what it's going to look like. What do you want it to look like? All you know is what you have already passed by and seen in your rearview mirror. Right. So taking that rearview mirror off and going, what do I want my future to look like? If I can create anything, because I'm a powerful, creative human being and my thoughts and intentions create things and they're powerful. And that's what quantum physics says. What do I want to create if I can have anything I want? Mm-hmm. As long as if it's harmful, it's not going to align with my highest good or my highest truth. So I can't really create harmful things, but I can create what the past has already brought. I can create mediocrity. I can have low expectations. I can see more of the same, but I'm a powerful being. I get to create that. So part of what I'm educating people on is understanding this principle. These are science principles. This isn't just woo-woo, right. Fuzzy feeling. The quantum physics says this. It teaches us this.
Right. Yeah, it's really, really fascinating to get in there. And how do other, I guess, who do you get any backlash from? Do you get like backlash from other physicists talking about this stuff, or do you get it from uh, just regular everyday people? Like who do you normally see people going, oh, I don't believe in all that stuff. What do you think
That's a great question. If a large percentage of my clients are Christians, and so I have a very solid kind of theological background. When I'm explaining this to my clients, I'm giving them really good science and I'm demonstrating it. And so I would say in 7 years, I've had, on one hand, I can count the number of people that went, yeah, this is a little too weird for me, um, because of theology. And then one, because he was like a super science person and was just like, yeah, I can't totally wrap my brain around this. He was very disconnected from his emotions, very shut down.
about?
So, and that was okay. I don't expect everybody to grasp this, but I will say from 2013 to now, the collective consciousness of understanding these principles has grown exponentially. And so more and more people, more and more Christians are open to understanding that, scripture says the same thing. And that's really what I set out to teach the church was this is scriptural. God created quantum physics. This is
Mhm.
not going to disagree with his word. And so we just need to understand how they align, but then how do I apply these principles to my life in a powerful, life transforming way? And that's really what I'm after. I have not had a lot of backlash in alternative medicine either, just because it's become way more accepted than allopathic. Obviously, it's a conflict contradiction, but most of the people who come to see me have already either accepted a more alternative possibility. I do as much as I can to make them feel safe and comfortable.
Mhm.
And sometimes it takes a couple sessions before they do that, but most of the time that's been my experience. So,
Right. And when you look at the biblical side of it, right? You have the science experiments of how, like you're talking about making the homeopathic medicine or whatever, where the vibration. Well, if you look, Jesus walking on water, and then Moses parting the Red Sea. If water can be affected that way, it's
yeah,
not that much of a stretch to say, well, if there's a supernatural being like God, of course they would be able to, you know, use water and affect it that way
yeah, no,
to
that's a
change
good.
its property.
That's a really good point. Yeah, we have authority over water. What we speak to water, and water is affected by our words, and that's what those experiments really teach. So, yeah, that's a really good point. I
Yeah.
know I do dream interpretation and other spiritual, understandings, and water is typically a representation of the spirit realm.
Mhm.
Um, so, it's an interesting that metaphor would be affected. Jesus talked about speaking with authority, and he spoke and things happened. And so, he says, because I go to the Father, greater power, greater things will you do. And so we have this idea of authority. So our authority has power, and that power specifically can affect water. And then other people are human beings are made up of 65 or more percent water. So really, when you tie all those together, in the book of James, it talks a lot about the tongue and the power of words. And I really felt like one of the things God told me is he said, one of the reasons I don't give my people more authority is because if your words truly had that level of power in it, and you don't operate in love, and you don't operate in self-control, we literally would see people falling over dead because we were mad.
Mhm.
And so, God in his wisdom doesn't dole that out to the level of being able, if our words are not healing, Jesus's words healed. If our words, because we have all these trapped emotions and traumas, so you get me mad, and so I curse you to die. And if I truly walked in the authority of Jesus, it says he cursed the olive tree and it dried up, right?
Yeah.
So if we had that kind of authority, we'd be in trouble until we got to a certain place where we truly just had a greater ability to walk in love, peace, and joy, so that we could speak life and think life and intend life. And that's, that's the long journey as a Christian, is coming to that place where we genuinely have really good heart intentions most of the time. Right.
Right. Right. It's a long journey to get there for sure, but it's helped me along a lot because over and over again, people that I've talked to, it's and you kind of touched on a little bit too with how it happened with you with counseling, but over and over again, it's one person in somebody's life that says, "Oh, hey, you made this good. You should make that for a living," or "Hey, you do this really well. You should do this." And it sets that person's life off on a different journey because they never thought about either doing that for a living or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And so for that really showed it to me, right there. Hey, your words have power. You may not even realize it. Maybe you just beat that person in passing, and you never see them again. But that sentence may send their life in a different trajectory.
Yeah. And I'm sure you've heard the stories where true stories where somebody was going to commit suicide that day and something happened and they just ran into somebody who encouraged them and they chose not to. And so sometimes you don't know whose life you're saving just by walking in the world with an intention of being an encourager, uplifting, affirming, paying somebody a compliment, just even noticing somebody and kind of having that mindset out in the world, truly could be saving somebody's life and you don't even know it.
Yep. Yep. You just truly never know, and it's why, like you're saying, when I was hearing you talk about it, you're an ordained minister as well. But when I was hearing you talk about it, it's kind of funny just all the instances you see in the Bible, and the sermon that I heard today or yesterday. You heard yesterday from my church was about how God doesn't give you it all right away. He gives you piece by piece. Otherwise, you would worship the buffet and not the person that's given it to you. And so, probably the same in your life. Had you had success that you're having now earlier, the other areas of your life that you since worked on and fixed so that you can be joyful, you might have neglected because you were having the success that you have now.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. One of the things I'll say, as difficult as my marriage was, it was my walking through that, learning how to process hard emotions and develop emotional maturity. And the second thing is that, when we walk through healing, if quantumly, our memories kind of exist outside of space and time. They're not stuck in our body. And so literally when I go into my past and I pull pain out of a memory, that memory changes. And so I can honestly say, as painful as much pain as I had in my marriage, and I had experienced this with the eating disorder. I'd gone back through and remembered all the torment and the obsessiveness, pulled that pain out, and I remembered it chronologically, but not emotionally. And the same is true with my marriage. I've done so much work around my own healing from being the spouse of a porn sex addict, was that I was able to truly heal those painful memories. My ex-husband and I have a great relationship. He actually kind of had a supernatural healing later on, and which is a very cool story. Almost died and had a supernatural healing, but he and I have a great relationship because all that pain that was attached to those memories has been removed. So the fruit of walking through that really hard experience, that triggered so many negative emotions, but because I was able to process some of those and then go back even and bring healing and release to the ones I still had, I only remember the good things in my marriage. I remember my children and the family things we did together and the good moments. No memory is always 100% bad all the time. And I work with survivors of satanic ritual abuse. So, there's serious trauma in those people's lives. And so, our memories are either locked in mostly because of trapped emotions. we remember odd things, and a lot of those odd things we remember is because there was a heightened emotion, negative emotion attached to the event. If we pulled the emotion out, we would either forget the event or it would just be, insignificant.
Right. Right. Yeah, that makes sense, and that really helps figure out why you have some memories and why you don't have other memories, because the emotion helps probably imprint those little water molecules in your brain with the memory of it for sure.
Yeah. Every child remembers going to the principal's office. At least if they went, they remember that moment the first time anyway. After that, if they were all the time, they won't, but they'll remember the first one. So.
I remember a few times being there. But,
okay.
Yeah. But not all of them, no. And I've had your URL going across above the screen, thrivewithrobin.com. So if they want to get any of your books or any of your stuff and find out where you're at, or if you have, probably not right now, no speaking engagements probably right now, but when you do, you'll probably put them up there as well.
They'll be up there, and that's a new site. My other site, integratedlifestrategies.com, is my practitioner site. And two things on that. One is I do training to teach people what I do, and it's a certified modality. So people who are interested in becoming holistic practitioners can do my training and get certified as a holistic practitioner. And I do that on Zoom, so you don't have to travel. And so a lot of my private practice, I'm shifting more towards public speaking and training, which I love. I love to mentor these other healers. I feel like that is an exponential growth of, healing the world by training other people to do this. And so I'm very passionate about that. And I love teaching. So the thrive.robin.com, I think it's linked, thrivewithrobin.com. I think it's linked to my other site. I'm not sure yet. It's a brand new site. But the other site is integratedlifestrategies.com.
Right.
And that's where they can learn more about training. I have some products on that website, and also, making an appointment. And I do Zoom sessions all over the world. Quantum physics allows me to muscle test remotely, so right. I can do this anywhere.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you having on. Stick with me for a moment. And guys, until next time, stop waiting for life to happen and make it happen. And you can use, quantum physics to make it happen. I'll see you next time, guys.